Good morning, YouTube. This is the Oracle coming in for another edition of my thoughts and my experiences as an ex-Jehovah Witness. Today I wanted to talk about a subject that is another one that is near and dear to my heart, and things that I actually saw in my own family. As most of you that have followed my other videos know, that I'm a third generation Jehovah Witness. I'm not a Jehovah Witness anymore, but the majority of my family are still practicing Jehovah Witnesses. So even though I've been out of the religion for the majority of my life, I was raised in it until I was 17 years old. And because my parents were still in it, my grandparents were still in it until they passed, my father is still alive. I've actually had to deal with a lot of things that people don't think about even after you leave the Jehovah Witness religion, if your family is still involved in it. So I wanted to talk about why Jehovah Witnesses are not prepared for death, and they're not prepared for getting old. This is a theme that came up quite coincidentally. My grandfather had passed, and I talked a little bit about his entire life that I know about, and a lot of the things that he did. I don't want to go back over that, but there's a video about my pedophile grandfather that was a presiding overseer. So it was a lot of things that went on at my grandfather's funeral, and a lot of things that came out at my grandfather's funeral and after he passed away. But one of the things that I remember clearly was a conversation I had with my aunt. We were walking back from the funeral, and my aunt started breaking down, crying, and I was consoling her. But one of the things that she said was, we were not prepared. We were not prepared to live this long. We were not prepared for our parents dying. We weren't raised this way. And I think about that a lot, because I understand. My aunt comes from another generation of Jehovah Witnesses, and as I've mentioned before, this is an apocalyptic religion. So one of the cornerstones of this religion has been about predicting the end of the world. So you know that there's been about 4 different instances where they were 100% sure that it was going to happen, and they had to make changes in their publications and in their conventions to talk about, why they had new light. And I've talked about all these things in other videos, but for those that have been associated with this cult for years, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So anyone that's actually been born and raised in this cult knows that that's an ongoing theme, is waiting for Armageddon to happen, and getting prepared, and trying to read the headlines and see what's going on to be ready for your death, for the destruction of the majority of the world. So if that's the way that you're raised, you actually are not thinking that you're going to live to be old, and you're not preparing for that, and you're not doing things that need to be done in order to have a retirement plan in place, to make good financial decisions for yourself and your family. And so what's happened is, a lot of people that have been in the religion for all of their life, and they're hitting their 50s and 60s, and they're like, well, you know what, Armageddon didn't happen. And I really didn't, get a job that gave me a good pension. I didn't put a lot of money in my 401k. I don't have a will. I don't have a life insurance policy for my family, for things that may happen. And this came up in a conversation I was having with a few ex-Jehovah Witnesses about Prince. So, one of the things that went on when Prince died is that people were really shocked that this entertainer that had amassed millions of dollars and had so many things that he had acquired in his life, and was talking about how important it was for him to own his masters and all that type of stuff. And then when he died, they found out he did not have a will. And he didn't have anything in place for his property, for his family, for any of that. And, I say, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that Prince didn't have anything in place when he died, because he was still associated with a Jehovah Witness cult. Now, I have heard people say that were closely related to him, in terms of they were talking with him and were close to him until his death. And some have told me that he was starting to realize that it was a cult, and that there were a lot of issues with it, but he never disassociated himself. And so when he died, he was still in good standing. So a lot of people realize that it is actually a process of waking up, and it doesn't happen overnight. And a lot of times people are sort of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, still holding on to a lot of doctrine. And the Armageddon doctrine and the fear of dying in Armageddon is the hardest one to break. So when you get into this cult, or especially when you've been raised in this cult, it's a type of dialogue that you have on a regular basis. You're waiting for the system to end. You're ready to live in a paradise on earth. You've been mind controlled. This is an ongoing theme. So you're not thinking about getting old. You're not thinking about your death or the things that you need to do. And I don't mean to be fatalistic or cold-hearted. I just mean that there's a lot of things that people don't think about. And it's really important for people to understand that this really hits certain communities hard, especially minority communities, because as I mentioned before, Jehovah Witnesses went after certain groups of people in the United States who really don't, by nature of the way this country was organized, didn't have a lot of opportunities to make a lot of money. So then when the opportunities did exist, you have a cult that is telling them, you don't really need to get a higher education. You need to take every waking moment that you have and devote free labor to this cult. And we're telling you that we're going to protect you and we're going to help you, because we're here to help you predict the end of the world and to be protected when it does happen. So here's what's happened. You have groups of people, and this hits really close to home for me, because I've seen this with my own parents, where, as I mentioned, in their old age, and my parents weren't that old, but my mother, my grandparents, they were not prepared to get old, and they were not prepared for what needed to be done for their heirs and for their family, because they had not gone out and gotten careers that would actually assist them with retirement, assist them with having things in place. And it's not just about financially planning and having a good enough job so that you can have something for yourself when you get to be 60, when you get to be 70, when you get to be 80, but also having things in place. You need to have a life insurance policy. You need to have a will. You can't leave everything up to chance. Well, this isn't important. And then you leave it up to your children and your grandchildren to have to sort out the mess that you've left because you didn't plan anything, because you were thinking about Armageddon and a new system. That has never manifested, has never happened. And, I always like to give a lot of anecdotal evidence or experiences from my own life. And I've had to deal with it. And a lot of ex-Jehovah Witnesses have to deal with this, and they're blindsided. My parents weren't talking to me until they realized that they didn't have enough money to help them when they got older. And they systematically were giving all their money to a society. They were spending all of their time. I mean, so many people don't work, and all they do is give their free labor, and it's slave labor. If you're out there and you're working 90, 70, 100 hours a month to a place that doesn't pay you, that doesn't give you health insurance, that doesn't give you a 401k or anything, and then you get old and you have nothing. You have nothing in place. And the part that people don't think about, and I really need to hit on this, because this happened with my grandmother. She did work, but she didn't always work in careers where she was using her social security number for people that live in the United States. So when she actually was going to Social Security to get her Social Security check, she didn't have a lot that she could actually request. That happened with both of my grandmothers. So I'm like, so a lot of these Jehovah Witnesses that are pioneers, and they're sitting there and that's all they're doing. And then when you retire, you're too old to go out and knock on doors, or now they have carts or whatever. Or when you're in Bethel, does Bethel pay you through a pay stub that once you leave Bethel that you can actually file for unemployment or get Social Security? See, these are things that people need to think about, because when you actually get older, and this country actually does have something in place so that you can get Social Security, but you're not going to get Social Security if you have not paid into it. So if you're out there and you're doing pioneering for 30 plus years and you've never gotten a paycheck, okay, when you get to be 65 and 70, don't think that you're actually going to get Social Security from the government. And then on top of that, I mean, there are people like my partner and I, we work. We work. As I said, I'm an executive. I'm a boss. And my partner's at the same level that I'm at. So, and we invest heavily in our retirement and our 401k because we've seen the mistakes of our parents, because we've seen the mistakes of our grandparents. And think about what happens if you're in an apocalyptic cult that is always talking about the end of the world. The system is not going to be here. And even in myself, when I looked back on the year 2000, because there wasn't a huge thing about it in the Jehovah Witnesses, and I had been left, but I heard the rhetoric of them, saying, it's always like when there's a lot of negative things going on in the country, if there's wars in other countries, they always look at it as signs. I remember being a little bit, playful, if you will, with my grandmother when she would start on that, have you seen the news? And it's bad. It's worse than it's ever been. They always love to say that it's so bad. Have you seen all the things that's going on? They're saying that there has never been a time that there have been so many things that have happened. And I would tell my grandmother, well, think about people in Bosnia. Think about people in other parts of the world where they actually live on less than $1 a day. Think about war-torn, countries that have had things happen you know, since inception, or, for over, 50 years. And let's just talk about the destruction of so many civilizations. This isn't new. This isn't like what's happening in the United States. It's something that is so significant. Things have been much worse, and there's nothing significant about what's going on today. So in that, but again, that's part of the rhetoric and the theme of a mind controlled cult that whole premise is on predicting the end of the world, and then having a publication empire that actually tries to indoctrinate people by buying publications to support that. But I also want to sort of update my publishing empire and say that it's also a property empire. The Jehovah Witness Corporation has one of the largest acquisitions of property in the world. And people need to understand that they're getting a lot of their money from free labor. If you're not being paid, and even people, like I've said, you go to Bethel, how much are you actually paid? You're not paid. You're not paid. You're given what they call a living. They give you something for the basic utensils that you need, and basic things that you need. So $50 a week or $50 every 2 weeks is not pay. That's slave labor. No one can live off of that. No one, and they do that in concentration camps. So for people to think that, well, they give you food and they give you a place to sleep. Well, that happens in prisons. So if you're actually going somewhere and they don't give you a paycheck, and they don't give you health insurance, and they don't give you a pension, and they don't give you a 401k, you have nothing for retirement. You are totally not prepared to retire, and you're not prepared to live a long time because you have nothing to go anywhere and get any type of support from the government. And see, that's the kicker, because even though they tell you to be no part of the world, they don't give you any support when you get older. They don't give you any support when you have social service issues. There's no support for the elderly. And that's because this apocalyptic cult, the theme is we're waiting for Armageddon. So you wait for Armageddon, right? And then what's happening to all the people that have been in this cult their whole life? Again, my aunt was in that cult, and she's not been in it, but she still is involved with a lot of the family that is in it. And I think, again, I'm not addressing anyone in particular, because I understand that it's very difficult for people to let go of that one ideology, because that's a big fear tactic. Even for myself, I was about like 27, I think, and my company had a seminar for retirement. And I went to the seminar, and I went home, and I really, was like, you know what? I have not really done what I needed to do in terms of contributing to my retirement. I've not really I don't have a will. I really wasn't putting much into my life insurance policy. And I realized that the reason why I wasn't doing that is because even though I wasn't in this cult, I had still had this indoctrination that I was waiting for something to happen. And that was wrong of me. I was like, why am I not planning for the unforeseen? Why am I not doing what needs to be done? And you're gonna see that a lot. So I just wanted to take just, you know, not a long video, but just I wanted to talk about some of the ideology and some of the things that even we as ex-Jehovah Witnesses need to examine. So what are you doing? Are you ready for retirement? Are you ready to live a long time? Have you done what you've needed to do in terms of your finances? Do you have a will? Do you have a life insurance policy? Are you making sure that you have investments in place so that, you know, who knows what's going to happen with Social Security for those that are in the United States. But don't use the mentality that you don't need to plan. You do need to plan, because here's what happens. Your family that's left, they're left to take care of things that you didn't put into place, or you have siblings or you have family members that are fighting over scraps. And, you know, that's not fair. So again, I think that the most important thing is that we share information, that we continue to be awakened and inspired and help people to break the mind control. Because again, the fear tactics and being indoctrinated at that level, it takes a long time to break. And sometimes we don't even realize what we're holding on to until somebody actually brings it up. So thank you so much for listening to my video. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you soon.